I lost my job the same day I found out I was pregnant. My name is Sophie, and I'm 37 years old. This is the story of how my entire life collapsed in a single afternoon, and how I slowly, painfully, rebuilt it from the ground up. It all started on a Wednesday. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, when I noticed something strange. I'd been feeling off for a few days, tired, nauseous, and my emotions were all over the place. I chalked it up to stress until I took a test. 2 pink lines. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, holding the pregnancy test with trembling hands. I couldn't believe it. After months of trying and finally giving up, it had happened. I was pregnant. My husband Daniel was out of town on a business trip, so I didn't have anyone to talk to right away. I just sat there, staring at the test, heart pounding. It felt surreal, like the start of something new, and even though I was scared, there was a flicker of happiness deep in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change for the better. The next morning, I walked into the office like everything was normal. I'd been working at Bell and Mason Accounting for nearly 8 years. I was the first one in, the last one out, and always met my deadlines. I was proud of what I'd built. There had been talks about a promotion. My name had come up more than once. Everyone knew I was the most likely candidate, but that day, something felt off. The atmosphere was strange. People were whispering more than usual. When I got to my desk, I saw an email from Mr. Caldwell, our department head, asking me to come to his office right before lunch. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. "Sophie, close the door," he said, without even looking up from his screen. I sat down, trying to keep my breathing steady. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't smile. "I'll get straight to it," he said coldly. "Due to restructuring, your position is being eliminated effective immediately." I blinked, not understanding. I'm sorry? What?" "You're being let go, Sophie." I felt my chest tighten. "But just last month, you said I was being considered for management." "That was before corporate revised our budget," he replied, still not meeting my eyes. I stared at him. "Is this because I'm pregnant?" That got his attention. He finally looked up, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" "I just found out yesterday," I whispered. "Are you firing me because you don't want to deal with maternity leave?" He leaned back in his chair, voice clipped. "That's a serious accusation." I stood up slowly, my whole body shaking. What's serious is that I gave this company everything for almost a decade, and you're throwing me out like garbage." He didn't say a word. I walked out of that office with my heart in my throat. My coworkers stared at me, but I didn't look back. I gathered my things in silence, trying not to cry. Outside, the air felt colder than usual. I sat in my car, the silence pressing in around me. I was pregnant. I was jobless. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. But as tears slid down my cheeks, I made myself a promise. No matter what happens, I will not break. The first person I called after everything happened was my husband, Daniel. I was still sitting in the car outside my now former office, hands shaking as I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey babe, everything okay?" I tried to steady my voice. "Daniel, I lost my job." There was a long pause. "Wait, what? What do you mean?" "They said it was restructuring, budget cuts, but I think it's because I'm pregnant." Another silence. I expected concern, comfort, maybe even outrage. Instead, he sighed. "Well, we both knew this job wouldn't last forever. You've been saying for months how stressful it was." That hit me like a punch to the chest. "Daniel, I'm pregnant. I just found out yesterday. And now I have no job, no income, and—" "You're pregnant?" he interrupted. I closed my eyes. "Yes." He didn't say anything for several seconds. Then finally, "Wow, that's a lot." I waited for him to say more, something, anything, but he didn't. "I thought you'd be happy," I whispered. "I mean, I am. I think. I need time to process, Sophie." That was the beginning of the unraveling. Over the next few days, Daniel grew distant. He stopped calling me during lunch like he used to. He claimed he was swamped at work. When he came home, he was distracted and irritable. I tried to talk to him, tried to share my fears, my hopes, but it was like speaking to a wall. One evening, a week after I lost my job, I finally confronted him. "Daniel, what's going on? You barely speak to me anymore. We're going to have a baby, and you act like I'm invisible." He didn't look at me. "Maybe this just isn't the right time, Sophie." "The right time for what?" "For any of this." I stared at him, stunned. "Are you saying you don't want the baby?" He rubbed his forehead. "I'm saying, I don't know if I want this life. The stress, the responsibility, it's not what I pictured." Something inside me shattered. "Are you kidding me? You think I planned this? You think I wanted to be unemployed and pregnant at the same time?" He stood up, grabbing his coat. "I need some air." And just like that, he left. That night, he didn't come back. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. I tried calling him. No answer. I sent a message. No reply. By evening, I was panicking. Then, at 9:42 p.m., I got a text. "I need time to think. Don't call me." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no plan. Just those 8 words. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands over my belly, trying to hold myself together. I had no job, no partner, and a baby on the way. But deep down, I knew something else too. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to rise. The days that followed were a blur of silence, tears, and unanswered questions. I kept checking my phone, hoping Daniel would reach out, that he would come home and say this was all a mistake. But he didn't. The apartment was so quiet it felt like it was swallowing me whole. I found myself talking to the baby, just to fill the silence. "Your dad's just confused," I'd whisper, resting my hands on my belly. "He'll come around. He has to." But by the 3rd week, reality started to sink in. Daniel wasn't coming back. That's when the bills started to pile up. My final paycheck had barely covered rent. I tried applying for unemployment, but the paperwork was overwhelming, and the process was slow. I sold my engagement ring just to keep the lights on for another month. I reached out to friends, hoping someone might let me crash for a while, but most were busy with their own lives, new jobs, marriages, kids. A few offered kind words, but that was all. I didn't blame them. People moved on. I was the one stuck. My landlord gave me a warning, 2 months behind on rent. "If you can't pay by the 1st, Sophie, I'll have no choice," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. I nodded, holding back tears. I spent the next few nights barely sleeping, scrolling through job listings at 3 a.m. But no one wanted to hire a visibly pregnant woman with a gap in her resume. It felt like I was being punished for trying to be a mother. Then, one morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. I opened it, heart pounding, half hoping it was Daniel. It wasn't. It was a woman in a navy blue polo with a clipboard in her hand. "Hi, are you Sophie Turner?" "Yes." "I'm with the property management company. I'm afraid we have to serve you a notice. You have 7 days to vacate the premises." My hands went numb. I barely heard the rest of what she said. I nodded, closed the door, and slid down to the floor. 7 days. That's all I had left. I sat there for what felt like hours, unable to move. Then I stood up. I walked into the bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were puffy, my cheeks pale, my belly now noticeably rounded. I whispered to my reflection, "You are not going to break." I packed what I could in 3 suitcases, threw the rest into boxes, and called a storage company. I sold the last of my furniture online, except the crib. That I kept, because I knew, somehow, I was going to need it. When the day came, I loaded my car with everything I owned. I looked one last time at the apartment that held so many memories, good and bad. Then I drove away. No plan. No money. Just me. And my baby. But I still had something no one could take from me. Hope. I spent the first few nights sleeping in my car. It wasn't ideal, especially being heavily pregnant, but it was all I had. I parked in well-lit areas near 24-hour stores and tried to stay invisible. I kept a blanket over the window and held my belly while whispering lullabies to calm us both down. I washed up in gas station bathrooms and used fast food coupons to eat once a day. Every dollar counted. My back ached constantly, and the fear of going into labor alone in a parking lot kept me wide awake most nights. One afternoon, as I sat outside a coffee shop using their free Wi-Fi, I overheard two women talking about a shelter downtown. It wasn't fancy, but they said it was clean and safe, and they accepted women with children, even unborn ones. I swallowed my pride and went. When I walked in, a woman named Carla greeted me with a tired but kind smile. She looked me up and down, my worn-out clothes, the bags under my eyes, my hands protectively resting on my belly, and simply said, "You don't have to explain. Let's get you a bed." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept in a real bed, with a pillow, with a blanket that didn't smell like my car. I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming relief of feeling safe. The shelter wasn't permanent, but it gave me a chance to breathe. They connected me with a counselor who helped me apply for government assistance and prenatal care. I was shocked when the nurse said, "You're due in about 5 weeks." 5 weeks. I wasn't ready, but maybe I could be. I spent the days helping out at the shelter, cleaning, organizing donations, anything to give back even a little. It gave me purpose. And then, one morning, Carla walked up to me with a flyer in her hand. "There's a new community housing program starting up. They're placing single mothers into transitional housing for a year. It's a lottery system, but I think you should apply." I stared at the flyer like it was a golden ticket. "I don't have any references, no job." Carla smiled. "I already wrote you a letter." I applied. And I waited. And while I waited, I prepared. I took the parenting classes the shelter offered. I learned how to budget, how to cook simple meals, how to build a routine. I was determined that when my baby came into this world, she would never feel like a burden. And then one evening, as I was folding donated baby clothes, Carla came rushing in. "You got it," she said, tears in her eyes. "Sophie, you got the apartment." I stood there frozen, the tiny onesie still in my hands. I had a home. It wasn't just 4 walls, it was a fresh start. Moving into that apartment felt surreal. It was small, just a 1-bedroom with creaky floors and mismatched appliances, but it was mine. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, hand on my belly, and whispered, "We made it." The first night there, I lay on the floor with just a blanket under me. There was no furniture, no dishes, no curtains, but I'd never felt richer in my life. Over the next few days, donations from the shelter came pouring in. A used crib, a battered but functional couch. A neighbor I hadn't even met left a box of canned food outside my door. It was like the world had suddenly started rooting for me. I spent every waking hour preparing for my daughter's arrival. I painted one wall of the bedroom a soft yellow and taped paper stars to the ceiling. I folded and refolded the tiny clothes, lined up the diapers, and practiced swaddling with a teddy bear someone had given me. And then, one morning, it happened. I was making oatmeal when the first contraction hit. It stole the breath right out of me. I called Carla in a panic. Within minutes, she was at my door, guiding me down the stairs, one step at a time. "I'm right here," she kept saying. "You're not alone." Hours later, in a bright hospital room filled with the sound of my own labored breathing, I met the most beautiful little girl I'd ever seen. I named her Hope, because that's what she was. Not just a name, a promise, a reminder of everything I'd survived. The moment they placed her on my chest, the world melted away. There was no heartbreak, no fear, no memory of Jason's betrayal. Just me and this tiny miracle who made it all worth it. The first few weeks were hard, of course, sleepless nights, endless diapers. But there was a rhythm to it, a new kind of purpose. I started attending support groups for single mothers, most of them older than me, wiser, stronger. They shared their stories, their advice, and their snacks. One day, one of the women looked at me and said, "You've got something, Sophie. Strength. You walk into the room, and it feels lighter. I didn't know what to say. I'd never thought of myself as strong, just surviving. But maybe surviving was strength. As the months passed, I started to heal. I applied for part-time jobs. I learned how to manage my finances. I found a routine that worked for both me and Hope. We'd go on walks every morning, just the two of us. She loved the breeze on her face, the way the trees swayed above us. I used those walks to clear my head, to make peace with the past. Because slowly, day by day, I was no longer just the woman who'd been abandoned. I was Sophie, a mother, a provider, a survivor. And for the first time in a long time, I started to dream again. A few weeks after Hope turned 1, something happened that shook me more than I expected. I ran into Jason's sister at the grocery store. I barely recognized her at first. She had cut her hair short and looked thinner, but when she looked up and our eyes met, I knew instantly. Her face went pale. She hesitated, then gave a tight, uncomfortable smile. "Sophie," she said, like she wasn't sure if she had the right to say my name. I nodded, unsure of what to feel. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He asked me to give you this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I could respond, she placed the note in my hand and walked away without another word. I stood in that aisle, clutching Hope's diaper bag in one hand and that paper in the other, unsure if I even wanted to read it. Back at home, once Hope was down for her nap, I finally opened it. It was a letter from Jason. The words were messy, rushed, almost desperate. He said he was sorry, said he regretted everything, claimed he never meant to hurt me, said he missed his daughter, even though he'd never once asked about her, not even after she was born. He ended it by asking if there was any chance we could talk. I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt tired. Because after everything, he still thought he could drop back into our lives like nothing had happened. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the back of my drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed to remember exactly why I'd fought so hard to build a life without him. A few days later, I applied for a full-time position at the community center where I'd been volunteering. The director, Maria, was a stern but kind woman who had become something of a mentor to me. She looked over my resume, then raised her eyes. "You've got grit, Sophie," she said. "I like that." I got the job. For the first time, I had a steady paycheck, health insurance, and a real sense of security. I started putting money aside, just a little at first, and opened a savings account in Hope's name. Every Friday, we had a tradition. After dinner, I'd hold her in my lap and show her our little notebook with the savings balance written inside. She didn't understand, of course, but I wanted her to grow up knowing that every step I took was for her, that she mattered, that she was worth fighting for. The more I worked, the more I realized how many women out there had been through what I had, or worse. And slowly, almost without meaning to, I became a source of strength for others. One evening, a young mom at the shelter pulled me aside and said, "I heard what you went through. If you can make it, maybe I can too." I smiled and hugged her, because I understood. I'd been her, and now I was something else, not perfect, not fearless, but whole, and I was just getting started. 3 years after I left Jason, something happened I never thought possible. I bought a house. It wasn't anything grand, a modest 2-bedroom home with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds, but it was mine. Bought with my own money, earned through sweat, sleepless nights, and sheer determination. Hope was 4 by then, and the day we moved in, she ran through the empty rooms laughing and clapping her hands like it was a palace. And to me, it was. We painted the walls together. Well, I painted, and she dipped her tiny fingers in the tray and decorated the hallway with pink handprints. I didn't stop her. That wall still has those prints. I kept them there as a reminder of how far we'd come, of the child who gave me a reason to keep going when I wanted to give up. One evening, while we sat on the porch eating ice cream, she looked at me and said, "Mommy, are we safe now?" It hit me so hard I couldn't speak for a moment. Then I pulled her close and whispered, "Yes, baby, we're safe now." The house gave me more than a roof over our heads. It gave me a sense of control I'd never had before. I built a small garden in the backyard with tomatoes and basil. I fixed the squeaky door myself. I learned how to patch drywall from YouTube videos. Every task, no matter how small, reminded me I was capable. I didn't need anyone to save me. One afternoon, while I was tending the garden, Maria, the director from the community center, came by. She had become a close friend and often stopped to check in. She smiled as she looked around. "You've created something beautiful here, Sophie," she said. "You should think about sharing your story. Other women could learn from you." I laughed at first. Who would care about my messy, painful journey? But she was serious, and after a few weeks of thinking, I agreed. I started small, giving talks at the shelter, then recording short videos for local support groups. To my surprise, women started reaching out. Some were still in abusive relationships. Others had just left and didn't know where to go next. They said my words gave them hope, and just like that, I found a new purpose. Not just surviving, but helping others find their way too. One night, after tucking Hope into bed, I sat on the porch alone, staring at the stars. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud, not for being perfect, but for refusing to stay broken. And I realized something. My past didn't define me. What I did with it did. The first time I stood in front of a room full of women to share my story, my hands trembled, not from fear of judgment, but from the weight of remembering. I looked out into their faces, some bruised, some tired, all searching, and I began. I told them about the lies, the betrayal, the cold nights on the shelter floor with my daughter asleep in my arms. I told them how I thought I had no future, no voice, no worth, and how, piece by piece, I rebuilt myself. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one woman stood up and clapped, then another, and another. Tears streamed down my face, not because I was sad, but because I knew I wasn't alone anymore. That moment marked something new. I started working full-time at the community center, helping other women navigate the same storm I once drowned in. I took courses in counseling. I started a small foundation that helped survivors find housing, legal aid, and support. One of our first success stories? A woman named Tara, who arrived with a toddler and 2 trash bags. She now runs her own bakery. She calls me her sister. And my daughter, Hope. She's 7 now, bright, loud, and fearless. The other day, she asked me if she could be a helper like me when she grows up. I smiled. "You already are, sweetheart." We recently celebrated 3 years in our home. We planted a tree in the backyard. Hope named it Freedom. Every time I look at it, I remember how far we've come, how pain turned into purpose, how weakness bloomed into strength. Sometimes I think back to Jason. I wonder if he ever thinks of us. But it doesn't hurt anymore, because his chapter in my story is closed. And mine? It's still being written. So if you're listening to this and you feel trapped, broken, or alone, hear me. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. And no matter how dark it feels, there is a way forward. It starts with one step, and then another, and then one day, you'll look around and realize you made it, just like I did.